Well, to be quite honest about it, in our lives, we simply do not doubt that we have bodies. We actually, I don't think, doubt for a moment that we are bodies in some sense. Or, to put it in an alternative way, that whatever we are, soul, mind, spirit, whatever we essentially are, that essence is bound up in a very intimate way with having a body. So one may ask, how does Descartes arrive at this, that he is, and by course, by extension, that we are things that think, that he is a thing that thinks, and that we are things that think. What he seems to be saying is we are essentially thought, or that for us, thinking is being. That, our mode of being is essentially thought. I don't know, all sorts of ways you could put this. We are essentially mental creatures as opposed to physical ones. How do you square this with this really common sense and, I would say, unshakable idea that in some way or another we have or are bodies? Well, the best way to do it is to trace his path of thinking here. Remember, he has decided that he will only accept as true something which he cannot doubt. And, the question is, can you doubt that you have a body, that your physicality and your senses that are associated with your body are real? And his claim is you can, and that one of the reasons you can doubt it, maybe the major reason you can doubt it, is that sometimes you're fooled about that. And that is that sometimes during sleep, when you're dreaming, at least, you seem to have a body. You seem to be touching, seeing, hearing, maybe even tasting things, but you're really not. As he says here on page 7, at the same time, I must remember that I am a man, and that consequently I am in the habit of sleeping, and in my dreams representing to myself the same things, or sometimes even less probable things, than do those who are insane in their waking moments. And, when I sleep, I seem to have a body, but it's not really. I seem to have a body that's in contact with an outside world, but all of that is just made up. All of that is illusion. All of that is my own subjective impressions, and I'm not really seeing any object that's external to me. I'm just experiencing some kind of mental, purely subjective internal process. How do I know that what I take to be waking life somehow is different? He says here, now let us assume that we are asleep and that all these particulars, for example, that we open our eyes, shake our head, extend our hands, and so on, are but false delusions. Let us reflect that possibly neither our hands nor our whole body are such as they appear to be. And I think what it comes down to is I do assume and must, for practical purposes, of course, assume that I have a body, that in certain ways I am a body. There's a price to pay if you don't. I mean, you walk in front of a bus, or you don't go to the doctor when you feel sick. I mean, those things are ridiculous, right? But when we get down to it, we can at least imagine that we don't have a body. That is, there is what he's trying to suggest is there's some, even if it's completely counterintuitive, there is actually some grounds for skepticism, for doubt. that I have a body, that my body is real. It may be a stretch. It may be really not incredibly convincing. And to many philosophers who've read Descartes in the past 400 years or so, have not been convinced at all that you can really doubt such a thing as your physical body being real. But Descartes thinks you can. And that's really important for his argument. That is that the truth of the matter is that I probably do have a body, right? I probably do. I mean, if I had to really put my money down on one side or another in terms of whether I have a body, I would definitely go with having a body, right? But the truth is, Descartes claims that I can imagine that I have no body. That is, I can imagine that my body's not real. I can imagine that my body is an illusion, and that everything that I associate with having a body is delusional. I can imagine that. So, on the one hand, no one seriously believes that they don't have a body, but you can imagine that you have no body, that all of your impressions of the world that you seem to get through the body, through the senses, all of your experience of your own body is really kind of a dreamlike illusion. You can imagine that, Descartes says. But what's crucial to the whole I am a thinking thing is that he claims I cannot imagine that I am not really thinking. That is, I can imagine that I have no body, even though I don't, at the end of the day, really think that that's probably true. But I cannot imagine. I simply cannot imagine. It's inconceivable that I'm not really thinking. And this is what he gets at in Meditation 2. He's really asking himself, what kind of creature am I? What then, he asks here on page 9, what then did I formerly believe myself to be? And then, he just describes a common sense notion of, being a creature, an embodied creature, like ourselves, being a human being. He has claimed that all of that can be doubted. All of our common sense entrenched notions of being a physical animal creature in a physical world, all of that can be doubted. But that there is a limit to that doubt. Well, here on page 10, this is good. All these things about me, he says, I can doubt. But he says, what of thinking? What about thinking? Because it seems to me that I am thinking. He says, I find here that thought, thinking, is an attribute that belongs to me. It alone cannot be separated from me. That's the key, right? I am. I exist. That is certain. That is, I cannot doubt my own existence. But how often? Just when I think. For it might possibly be the case, if I cease entirely to think, that I should likewise cease altogether to exist. That is, I cannot doubt my own existence, but why not? Well, because I am thinking. And I can conceive of myself, if I conceive of myself as ceasing to think, as having no more thought, perception, then that's conceiving of myself as no longer existing. So what he seems to be arguing is that he cannot doubt his own existence, so he must be real. But when he asks himself what sort of creature he is, he realizes that the only reason that he can't doubt his own existence is because he cannot imagine himself not thinking. That even if he's wrong, he's wrong. Even if he has a mistaken impression, he has a mistaken impression. That is, his mental life, his thought, his thinking, his mentality, so to speak, as opposed to his physicality, turns out to be something that he cannot imagine not to be real.